The breeze bore a note that resembled morning, drawn out, vacant, stretching forever. 3 silhouettes progressed gradually through the frozen expanse, leaning into the bitter chill that pierced both flesh and recollection. Leading them was an elderly woman of Apache descent, her spine bent yet resilient, each exhale forming phantom shapes in the frigid air. At 55, she'd survived warfare, starvation, and the gradual disappearance of her community. Yet she'd never outlasted her capacity for love. Behind her came her daughters, 2 delicate sparks struggling against the tempest. The older one 22, the younger 20, draped in whatever meager protection they still possessed. Each footfall was an act of faith, each distance covered a declaration that they wouldn't yield. Between this place and the distant peaks, they'd faced rejection at every threshold. Those who'd settled this land had greeted them with weapons instead of conversation. No space available, no sustenance offered, no compassion shown. With trembling fists they'd knocked, requesting not sympathy, but simply existence. And repeatedly, humanity had shut them out. The elderly woman's voice, once powerful enough to summon rainstorms, had become rough from begging. Now her words went only to the wind, murmuring to those who'd passed that she would not allow her children to perish beneath the open sky. Ahead, she spotted a slender ribbon of smoke spiraling into the ashen heavens. A dwelling. Hope, faint but present. Within that dwelling, a 30-year-old man occupied a space beside a fading fire, honing a blade intended not for harm but for labor. He worked as a rancher, wandered by nature, born beneath vast skies and solitude. His facial hair bore the ice of numerous harsh seasons, his gaze the tenderness of someone who'd experienced grief too early. A picture sat on the surface near him, his mother, wearing a subtle smile, perpetually captured in better days. The weather outside had been his sole company for days, wailing against the timber like a troubled spirit. When the knocking arrived, it disturbed even the flames. This wasn't a polite tap. This was urgency clothed in flesh and skeleton. He paused only briefly, questioning whether it was genuine. Then he stood, wrenched the door open, and confronted the blizzard directly. What met his eyes caused the blade to fall from his grasp. 3 forms nearly consumed by snow, gazes empty yet determined. The elderly woman's mouth quivered. "No one offers us refuge," she uttered gently, her statement almost swallowed by the gale. The rancher didn't inquire about their identity or purpose. He merely moved to the side, his words firm as a vow. "Then refuge is what you'll find here." They crossed the threshold quietly, as though fearful that mercy might disappear if they disturbed it. The dwelling swelled with their breathing, their trembling, their thankfulness. He provided them with bread drenched in heated soup, his own share abandoned. The younger child smiled despite her rattling teeth, a fragile luminosity returning to her face. The older one remained speechless, her bearing protective, the burden of suspicion heavy from excessive cruelties endured. The elderly woman murmured phrases in her ancestral language, hands quaking as she extended them toward the flames, giving thanks for the heat, giving thanks for the unfamiliar man who had welcomed them inside. For hours, the tempest battered everything beyond the walls, the structure shuddering beneath its assault. Yet inside, something gentler awakened. The rancher absorbed their hushed accounts, fragments of amusement between intervals, melodies hummed beneath their breath, recollections shared in pieces. They explained how their community had been forced from the riverside territories, how they traveled for days, carrying nothing except belief. He didn't respond with sympathy. He absorbed their words the way soil absorbs rainfall, wordless but open. When the elderly woman's gaze found his, she recognized not a rescuer, but a son she could have once raised. Night descended heavily, bearing down on the glass panes. The rancher spread additional covers near the hearth. "The ground's harsh," he mentioned, "but the warmth is yours to share." He moved to repair the entrance fastener, though his attention remained on their expressions, the strength carved into their faces, the understated grace even amid weariness. After the women finally drifted into sleep, he stayed conscious, gazing into the amber core of the fire. His mother's teachings returned to him, gentle and unwavering. "Compassion is the only dwelling a spirit can construct in this existence." Beyond the walls, wild dogs cried in the remoteness, though their sounds seemed distant. Inside, tranquility maintained its position. The rancher's mind wandered between what had been and what was present, between what he'd sacrificed and what had just appeared at his entrance. He glanced toward the resting forms. The elderly woman nestled near her children, their bodies pulled together like a single strand of endurance. Something within him relaxed. Something long hardened started to soften. As daybreak arrived, the storm had exhausted itself. The landscape beyond lay motionless, pale, merciful. The rancher approached the entrance and pulled it open to the dim illumination. The atmosphere felt pure, nearly holy. Behind him, the elderly woman roused, her vision tracking his outline framed in the opening. she breathed, scarcely heard. "You bring to mind my son." He pivoted slowly, the words lodging in his chest. "And you bring to mind my mother." The flames whispered gently between them, reflecting something more ancient than either, something known to every spirit that's ever yearned for protection in an existence too harsh to nurture. And as the illumination spread across the floor of the dwelling, he sensed it, an invisible transformation, hushed but definite. Unknown travelers had entered during the storm, but by sunrise, he was isolated no longer. Yet beyond, the distant edge still shimmered with stories left incomplete, and he couldn't dismiss the feeling that this beginning was merely the stillness preceding a different sort of turbulence. The frozen water started dissolving in silent capitulation, withdrawing from the terrain like a phantom who'd at last discovered rest. The dwelling that had previously existed as a solitary station now pulsed with existence, vapor twisting from its chimney, amusement resonating faintly through its interior. The elderly Apache woman moved carefully through the area, her hands sure as she agitated the vessel suspended above the flames. The fragrance of plants and grain saturated the atmosphere, natural and comforting. Her 2 children assisted with familiar cadence, their actions a type of wordless harmony. The younger one, swift with merriment, carried untamed blossoms indoors each sunrise, introducing pigment back into an existence that had abandoned it. The older one progressed more deliberately, more quietly, her contemplations weightier than her movements. And the rancher, the man who'd permitted them entry, observed the pattern of their existence start to merge with his own. He'd existed through years without detecting another person's voice at daybreak, without someone to occupy the quietness of hot beverages and dawn. Now, when he raised his attention from his tasks, there was constantly someone present, plants drying beside the opening, a gentle melody ascending from the elderly woman's voice, the noise of careful footsteps crossing timber surfaces. He discovered himself repairing things he hadn't valued previously. The tilted platform, the noisy fastener, the dripping roof, as though each fastener and board were a tribute to this delicate unity. During evenings, they gathered around the flames together. The elderly woman shared her community's traditions, the presences that inhabited waterways and minerals, the melodies that mended. The rancher absorbed, as though each statement were instruction the world itself had been attempting to impart. The younger child laughed frequently, her happiness unprotected, bringing to mind a sibling he'd surrendered to illness during childhood, but the older one? She was distinct. Her vision bore the burden of separation, even when positioned nearby. When she communicated, it was with deliberation, as though every statement required something valuable from her. One evening, when the breeze whispered through openings in the entrance, she questioned why he'd assisted them. He considered extensively before responding. "Because no assistance reached my mother," he stated at last. "And I vowed to myself that if I ever encountered someone requiring help, I'd be the entrance that remained available." She observed him for an extended moment, her expression mellowed by the firelight, and something unvoiced transferred between them, a comprehension more profound than appreciation. It marked the first occasion she smiled without apprehension. As the warmer season approached, the terrain evolved. Waterways liberated themselves from their frozen prisons. The ground respired once more, and existence returned in modest, rebellious forms. The rancher instructed them to cultivate grain along the clearing's perimeter, to restore barriers, to mount the aged horse that had been isolated in her enclosure. The older child labored alongside him, her hands growing coarse, her amusement tentative but authentic. He discovered himself observing her beyond his intentions. The manner daylight contacted her hair, the elegance concealed beneath survival's marks. The elderly woman detected it as well. She would smile inwardly, expressing nothing, only murmuring hushed blessings when neither noticed. The younger child teased her sibling gently, and the older one would flush, feigning indifference. Yet as the days extended, the atmosphere between her and the rancher intensified like heavens anticipating lightning. Then arrived the day of testing. A collection of settlers traveled through the lowland. For men with expressions rigid as mineral, seeking provisions or perhaps something more vicious. They spotted the women beyond the dwelling, their Apache characteristics capturing the men's contempt like provocation. Statements were traded, repulsive, resentful statements that carried the flavor of loathing. The rancher emerged, his firearm positioned loosely at his waist. His tone was composed, though steel resided within it. "They're beneath my protection," he stated, his position immovable. "You'll demonstrate respect or you'll depart." The men studied him, evaluating his determination. One expelled saliva into the soil, muttered profanity, and redirected his mount. The others trailed, their disdain lingering behind them like particles. The quietness they abandoned was substantial, saturated with the resonance of what might have occurred. The elderly woman's vision glistened with moisture she didn't attempt to conceal. She extended outward and positioned her aged hand on the rancher's limb, a blessing without language. In that instant, Something hallowed established itself in the area between them all, an agreement of faith constructed not from lineage, but from collective bravery. That evening, the older child positioned herself with him beyond the dwelling beneath the celestial bodies. The atmosphere was refreshing, aromatic with the fragrance of defrosting soil. "You weren't obligated to defend us," she expressed quietly. He moved his head in negation. "Yes, I was." She examined him, then truly examined, and for the first occasion recognized not an outsider, not a deliverer, but a man, imperfect, compassionate, human. Her spirit, extensively hardened in terror, started to defrost. They positioned themselves closely, quietness developing between them, like untamed blossoms following rainfall. No statements could have transported the significance of that instant. The flames from inside wavered across their expressions, and when their hands grazed, neither withdrew. The contact was minimal, nearly unintentional, yet it transported the strength of a vow. One neither ventured to vocalize openly. The elderly woman observed them from the entrance, the firelight behind her transforming her hair to metallic flame. She smiled gently and breathed to the darkness. "The divine has peculiar methods of restoring what was sacrificed." When daybreak arrived, it discovered them still positioned together beneath the tree, the identical location where the rancher had laid his mother to rest. A solitary flower had emerged on its limb, fragile against the early illumination. The older child extended outward and contacted it, her digits trembling. "The warm season arrived after all," she whispered. He observed her, and something within him stabilized. A lifetime of isolation transforming into connection. The dwelling, once protection against the tempest, had evolved into a home. Yet in the stillness of that instant, as birds awakened in the initial warmth of morning that touched the flatlands, a hushed reality emerged between them. Affection once discovered demands protection just as intensely as existence itself. And far past the distant edge, the breeze started ascending once more.